remember vividly, I was on this network like a month after, and this issue came up. I said he won the election. Let's get over it and stop talking about it. There's a lot of people in a lot of different places. I do find it interesting that Fox News is only concerned about Democratic election deniers. It seems like the Republicans took that whole thing a little bit more seriously in terms of storming the Capitol, in terms of doing all kinds of efforts to actually stop the election, as opposed to just issuing a couple of comments.
The Fox Propaganda Network is apparently quite salty over recent comments made by House Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries about the lack of election denialism in the Democratic Party compared to the Republican Party. And when a Fox News host confronted a Democratic congressman about this, that congressman shut her down and torched Fox News to their faces on live TV. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, to show and to talk about. This goes back to false equivalence. This is one of the tools of the MAGA Republican Party, the MAGA movement, and the right wing collectively, including Fox. They'll take two things and they'll say, these things must be equal. So, for example, under the broad notion of crime, it would be like saying that a shoplifter is equal to a murderer because they're both crimes, you see. Or how a cold is equal to stage 4 cancer because they're both illnesses. But people who are functioning adults are able to recognize meaningful differences between two things, right? And not just stop the analysis so lazily. Unfortunately, Fox can't do that, because to do that would be to admit on most issues that the Republicans are worse. So I want to play you this clip from House Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries on the floor of the House after Mike Johnson was voted Speaker of the House. We're going to play this clip, and then we'll get to the clash between a Fox News host and a Democratic congressman about these comments.
Thank you, President Biden and Vice President Harris, for your powerful, principled, and purposeful public service. Thank you. Two months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You see, one should love America. One should love America when you win and when you lose. That's the patriotic thing to do, and that's the America that House Democrats will fight hard to preserve, because we love this country.
So those are the comments made by Hakeem Jeffries. Again, note the lack of applause for Vice President Harris and for President Biden. Again, we're in really partisan times. I digress. So this gets us to Fox News. So Congressman Adam Smith, a Democrat, appeared on Fox News Sunday and was confronted about these remarks by Hakeem Jeffries. And the Fox News host did something clever by going for a gotcha of false equivalence. So we're going to play the clip in its entirety, and you're going to see Adam Smith shut this shit down pretty brutally.
But in 2018, Jeffries wrote, "The more we learn about 2016 election, the more illegitimate it becomes. America deserves to know whether we have a fake president in the Oval Office." And then he doubled down in 2020. He posted to Trump, "Keep pouting. History will never accept you as a legitimate president." What changed?
Well, I think a lot of Democrats made mistakes in terms of complaining about the 2016 election. I remember vividly, I was on this network like a month after, and this issue came up. I said he won the election. Let's get over it and stop talking about it. There's a lot of people in a lot of different places. I do find it interesting that Fox News is only concerned about Democratic election deniers. It seems like the Republicans took that whole thing a little bit more seriously in terms of storming the Capitol, in terms of doing all kinds of efforts to actually stop the election, as opposed to just issuing a couple of comments. So yeah, people will get emotional about elections. Nobody should try to stop an election from being certified. In fact, tomorrow, snow willing, we will be certifying President Trump's election. You will not see Democrats stand up and protest that. You will certainly not see them storm the United States Capitol to try and stop that certification. we accept the election of President Trump, and we will do our best to work with him going forward.
Well, I would argue that this network covered all sorts of election deniers across the spectrum. But do you expect any of your colleagues to put up any challenges tomorrow when the election is certified?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of us. I don't think so. But gosh, go back to 2000 and I think 2016, there was, I think, one House member, Democrat, who, protested the election then. Didn't have a senator, so it didn't go anywhere. But there's a lot of us, but I can tell you 99% of Democrats, this is the way the election went out, and we're going to go work with the new government.
Finally, with just 30 seconds left.
So there's a lot there, right? Again, notice the gotcha. And I should say, Jacqui Heinrich, who is substituting for Shannon Bream, in my opinion, is better than Shannon Bream. Jacqui Heinrich is about as fair as a Fox News host not named Jessica Tarlov can be, okay? But quite frankly, even that is the standard Fox playbook, okay? So let's get to Hakeem Jeffries' comments, okay? Was Trump an illegitimate president? No, not in the terms of how we define it here in the United States. He didn't win the popular vote in 2016, but he did win the Electoral College. Was there intervention, meddling by foreign adversaries? Yes, but we have no evidence that it was outcome determinative. We just don't, okay? So was it irresponsible to refer to Donald Trump as an illegitimate president? Yes. However, Adam Smith is correct to suggest that there is an equivalence here between what you see on the left versus the right, what you see on the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party is absurd. And he is right. Imagine, do you think Fox News makes a point to confront Republicans about the election denialism on their side? Imagine Jacqui Heinrich or any Fox News host confronting Republicans over, set aside January 6th, set aside the fake elector plot. What about just every comment made questioning President Biden's victory? That's all Fox News would cover 24/7 if they had to cover election denialism in the Republican Party the way they do election denialism in the Democratic Party, because there's infinitely more of it in the Republican Party than there is the Democratic Party. And then, of course, as Adam Smith points out, then there are major substantive differences as well, not just the frequency of election denialism, which is more rampant in the Republican Party. There's also the egregious steps that were taken. Democrats didn't plot to steal the 2016 election from Donald Trump. You may remember that it was a Democrat who was president of the United States at the time, Barack Obama. He didn't scheme with Secretary Hillary Clinton, the candidate, or Vice President Joe Biden, who was the one presiding over Donald Trump's victory on January 6, 2017. They accepted the outcome. Hillary Clinton went out the very next day and publicly conceded in a speech, saying that she actually called Donald Trump to congratulate him and to concede to him, which is the tradition. You concede to the victor, and then you give a concession speech. Hillary Clinton did that. Donald Trump didn't do that after the 2020 defeat that he suffered. Hillary Clinton is morally superior to Donald Trump. He is morally inferior. He is objectively worse on such a fundamental issue like conceding elections and the peaceful transfer of power. And Trump was the sitting president. And we used to believe in this country, at least we used to say we did, that with great power comes great responsibility. Trump, as the sitting president, had the highest obligation to accept the results of an election that he lost, to concede to the candidate, and to acknowledge it in public. He never did that. So again, Donald Trump is just worse than Hillary Clinton on her worst day. And Fox will never acknowledge that. Even Jacqui Heinrich, who again, I said, isn't as bad as most, even she says, well, I think this network has covered election denialism on both sides. But even that suggests an equivalence. A responsible journalist would say that is true. There are meaningful differences between the election denialism in the Democratic Party versus election denialism in the Republican Party. And you're right, Congressman. Democrats have gone nowhere near to the insidious lengths that Republicans have. I'll remind you, after this election, President Biden and Vice President Harris conceded the results, conceded publicly and privately to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was invited to the White House by President Biden. And there was a commitment, a public commitment to the peaceful transfer of power. And here you have Adam Smith saying he doesn't expect that there will be any objections to Donald Trump's victory tomorrow, January 6th. I'm sorry, it's apples and oranges. The Democratic Party, when it comes to elections, is just morally superior to the Republican Party. Anyone who pretends otherwise is an idiot or a liar. And speaking of liars, I'll point out, Adam Smith pointing out that it is interesting that Fox News puts emphasis, basically stepping over $1 for the sake of a penny. Well, that's part and parcel of what they do. I'll remind you that Fox had to pay $787 million for signal boosting the lies, knowingly signal boosting the lies and conspiracy theories of right-wingers and Republicans and Donald Trump that were defamatory against Dominion voting systems. This is the greatest defamation settlement on record. Staggering. CNN has never had to do this. MSNBC has never had to do this. Fox is, again, objectively worse, and they have an objectively worse record. It's stunning. ElectionDeniers.org is also a good website. It's a resource to have at your disposal because they track the landscape of election denial in America. 10 election deniers will serve as governors in 2025 out of 50 states. That's staggering. 9 election deniers will serve as state attorneys general in 2025. Again, staggering. Election deniers will serve as secretaries of state, 4 of them in 2025. 137 election deniers will serve in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2025. 20 election deniers will serve in the U.S. Senate in 2025. And you can break down, again, who exactly they are, the landscape in Congress. It'll go through Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, Jim Banks. So it goes through all these things. We will also have an election denier in 2025, 2 election deniers in the White House as the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I'm sorry. There's just a staggering asymmetry here. It's dishonest to pretend otherwise. As a matter of fact, I will remind you that even after the insurrection on January 6th, there were 147 Republicans who voted to overturn President Biden's victory. So again, this is what they do. MAGA and Fox and the Republicans, they like to blur the lines. It is the equivalent of somebody coming up to you and saying, hey, listen, crime is bad. Therefore, this shoplifter and this murderer are basically the same. They're both criminals. Well, again, functioning adults, and I would argue actually functioning, teens and adolescents, probably toddlers, can recognize meaningful differences between things. A murderer is worse than a shoplifter. Stage 4 cancer is worse than the cold. And simply to end the analysis of saying, well, they're both crimes or they're both illnesses is lazy, stupid, and dishonest. And we should call it out just like Adam Smith did. So great on him for doing so. Masterful performance. And in the meantime, if you end up liking this video, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells, and let me know what you think in the comments.